We start? Okay. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Very, very good evening. We are live streaming this, and it's also on Zoom. So good morning, good afternoon to all the participants who are joining us online. My name is Deepa Bharti. I work with the ILO Regional Office for the Asia Pacific with this program called Safe and Fair, Realizing Women Migrant Workers' Rights and Opportunities in ASEAN Region. You'll be hearing a bit more about the program. So we want to start by introducing the Spotlight Initiative and followed by the Safe and Fair program, which you'll be hearing about. And the videos will tell you a bit more. So can we start with what is the Spotlight Initiative, a brief introduction?
It's not that we haven't been working at it, but every now and again there comes a time in history where suddenly all the stars are aligned and you take that opportunity and you move. And I think that this is one where the European Union has been really helpful in putting a substantial amount of resources behind this issue. That helps.
We wanted to change the mindset, to change the attitude, to change the understanding of the problem. And we focused on a violence against women and girls because we see that violence is preventing so many aspects of a women's empowerment. If you deny access to education to a girl, to a woman, then this is a form of violence against women and girls. If you denied access to maternal health, to sexual and reproductive health and rights, this is again violence against women and girls. So we would like to tackle with the root causes of violence in each and every aspect, from a physical violence to this economic and social violence against women and girls.
Programs themselves will be happening in countries where it matters most, and so really finding a way to communicate that and put pressure on policymakers and those who can take the decisions to bring an end to this.
Violence against women and girls is a global issue. It's a global tragedy, I would say, and therefore the responses must be as global as possible.
There's a change in generation of what is acceptable and not, and people are speaking up, and I think that we're also getting more men's voices behind this. So I think the time is now.
We know that around 50% of migrant workers in ASEAN are women, and their numbers are rising. However, when migration is not safe and not fair, women migrants experience violence, trafficking, and labour exploitation. The Spotlight Initiative is a new UN-EU partnership shining a light on violence against women migrant workers in ASEAN countries and against women and girls globally. Spotlight's Safe and Fair program is implemented in partnership with the ILO and UN Women to prevent violence and exploitation and to realise the rights and opportunities of women migrant workers. The time is now for safe and fair labour migration for all women in the ASEAN region.
Thank you very much. When it says the time is now, this is a global program which started in 2017, pre-COVID, and the time really is now as well, post-COVID, where a lot of these risks have been enhanced. So we wanted to start with our introduction on what is Spotlight Initiative and what is Safe and Fair program. So once again, let me welcome all of you who've battled Bangkok rain and traffic. Thank you for your interest and for joining. And we had almost 200 people registered today for today's event. And we had to request some people to join online, given we are still at somewhat risk of COVID. And I do have my mask here. But since I'm a bit distant, so I'm not wearing it, with all your permission. You would see in the concept note the program structure. This is launch of a report which is titled A Very Beautiful But Heavy Jacket. And we'll be hearing about the report and people who have been involved in the report. A couple of words before we go to the program itself about why did we want to do this research, or why did we want to partner with on this research. When we started the Spotlight Initiative Safe and Fair program, we realized while we were talking of gender responsiveness and labor migration, ending violence, there was very little evidence of the intersectionality between sexual orientation, gender identity expressions, LGBTI people's experiences with labor migration. We tried to look for information, we couldn't find it. So we decided to partner with Edge Effect, and we are very honored to have Emily with us, and with Migrant Forum in Asia and ASEAN SOGIE Caucus to undertake this research in 4 ASEAN countries. We'll be hearing the findings and recommendations from this research. I want everybody to bear in mind that this was a study we started in 2019, pre-COVID. And with all the challenges we'll hear, we also found out where the risks were even further or were exacerbated, and how relevant or even more relevant the key findings would be. It's a 4-country study, so while we have our speakers here in the panel from Thailand and a migrant worker colleague from Thailand, we will also share with you some voices from the other countries. We want to acknowledge and thank the European Union for being the global leader in ending gender-based violence, addressing gender and labor migration, rights-based labor migration, a supporter of international labor standards, and really the wind beneath the wings and the force behind the Spotlight Initiative. If Spotlight had not happened for us, Safe and Fair would not have happened, and we would probably not be able to meet, at least in this kind of a context. So a huge thanks to the European Union. Today we have with us His Excellency Mr. Daniel Hashez, Minister Counselor and Head of Cooperation here in the European Union delegation in Thailand. I would like to invite Mr. Hashez to please join us here and give some welcome remarks. Thank you so much.
Good evening, distinguished delegates and media representatives. I'm very honored to be with you tonight, especially for such a topic, I must say, where we have to be bold, I think, in this world. It's a unique research that has been launched, and we'll hear from the experts very soon on the experiences of migrant workers with this diverse sexual orientation, gender identity and expression in ASEAN, with the title, A Very Beautiful But Heavy Jacket, indeed. Labor migration has been an important source of work for millions of people in an increasingly interconnected world, and certainly the ASEAN region. Just for us to think about it, remittances going to India each and every year it's an amount of money of dozens of billions US dollars each and every year, just for you to capture that. Very often, women are left behind in labor migration governance discussions, or women migrant workers are not able to benefit from the policies of fighting violence against women. So yes, the European Union and the UN system and agencies like ILO, like UN Women, represented also tonight, we have been working on this issue for a long time, thanks to this EU-UN Spotlight initiative, as was said, to eliminate all forms of gender-based violence against women and girls by 2030. But most probably it will be a never-ending story and process and work to be done. In the ASEAN region, through this Safe and Fair program, we have the objective of making labor migration safe and fair for all women in the ASEAN region, as you have understood. For many stakeholders, being gender responsive, that we try to do in all our implementation modes of development aid, including in budget support, for example, but being gender responsive still applies in a binary framework. That's for many stakeholders. Under the Spotlight Initiative Safe and Fair program, the study, evidence-based, as we just said with Emily a few minutes ago, is to understand the experiences and the realities of people with this diverse orientation, gender identity, and expression. This was undertaken exactly as Deepa said, to have the evidence necessary to put the policymakers under pressure so that they can't refute the obvious. There are very few to no studies in the region which bring together these diverse identities of workers to understand better the opportunities and also the challenges which labor migration brings, and how sexual orientation, gender identity, and expressions influence these experiences. So drawing on the research with 147 migrant workers with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expressions in Cambodia, in Thailand, in the Philippines, and Vietnam as well, the study, and we will hear more, shows what? Many people with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expressions find genuine economic opportunities through labor migration. 72% of them, of migrant workers interviewed, these 147, for the study, reported an economic advancement as their primary motivation for migration. Okay, so economic advancement as the primary motivation for migration. 63% of them reported as well that working abroad allowed them to meet the basic needs, remit money to families, as we just talked in the case of India, for example, save money to open businesses or purchase land in their country of origin, and obtain the skills and experiences that would enhance employment opportunities. Of the migrant workers interviewed, 41% also reported escaping from discrimination or restrictions on personal freedom at home as a motivation. So you have the push and pull factors in all that, as you can see. 59% reported that their quality of life was higher in their country of destination than in their country of origin. These opportunities for economic advancements, family acceptance, and personal transformation also exist with challenges related to discrimination, risks, or violence. The study revealed that at times discrimination followed them from their country of origin to their country of destination, with fellow migrant workers being an ongoing source of harassment. So it comes from all parts, with other words. These often led migrant workers with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expressions to avoid participating in events or training provided by service providers, and this contributed to their social isolation in their country of destination. Upon return, some migrant workers with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expressions reported having again lost the freedoms that they had enjoyed in the countries of destination, some returning to closed lives. Today, we gather here to hear more about the research, this evidence-based, which reveals the lived realities of a section of labor migrants who face unique challenges. And we meet tonight to discuss what can be done by us as a community, by our organizations, institutions, and by media professionals like you to end discrimination and violence and ensure decent work for all. Equality, respect for dignity, and respect for diversity are at the heart of the European Union. Thank you for the recognition we had, Deepa, in a minute ago. Everyone should be free to be who they are, perform their rights to live, to work, and to love whom they choose without fear. Now, 76% of the Europeans polled in 2019 agreed that gay, lesbian, or bisexual people should have the same rights as heterosexual people, up from 71% 4 years before. However, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people can face discrimination in many areas of life. For instance, when looking for a job or asking for social security benefits at school, or when they need health care. They may also face hate speech, even violence, and can feel unsafe in workplaces, schools, and public spaces. You can see that even in the EU, we still have a lot of work to be done, and as I said, maybe unfortunately, it will be a never-ending story, something you have to continuously work on. We still have a lot of progress to do even ourselves in the European Union. Now, if we go across the world, we have around over 2 billion people, fellow citizens of this planet, who live in countries where homosexuality is still considered a mental disorder or is illegal, if not even in certain cases, even criminal. We can read that, and you are there with the press, with the freedom of the press to expose all that. And thank you for doing that. In certain places ruled by authoritarian regimes, the goals of these LGBTIQ+ organizations often resemble those of pro-democracy groups, such as inclusiveness or equal rights. And this alignment of rainbow and democracy agendas has placed all this community under increasing pressure and scrutiny from these illiberal authorities. Nevertheless, over the last 10 years, we have seen signs of progress worldwide, yet discrimination and exclusion because of sexual orientation and gender identity persists, and we are witnessing a worrying pushback of the rights of people with diverse sexual orientation. Levels of violence against LGBTIQ+ persons are also alarming, even if, unfortunately, unreported. Young persons in particular can face rejection by their families, homelessness, harassment online or offline, based on their sexual orientation and gender identity. This year 2022 of the modern era, as it is called in Thailand, is the European Union Year of the Youth. Young persons need to be accepted and valued for who they are. We must strive to build peaceful, inclusive societies where everyone can thrive and feel safe. The EU can act on cases of discrimination based on sexual orientation. It has adopted legislation and has taken measures to extend legal and social protection for LGBTIQ+ people who would be excluded or were excluded until then. Since 2003, it has been illegal in the EU to discriminate against people in the workplace on the basis of their sexual orientation. Legislation obliges all the countries, the 27 member states of the European Union, to provide legal protection against discrimination when it comes to applying for a job, a promotion, a job, or training, as well as in matters concerning working conditions, pay and dismissal. It's an example that I'm giving you. The same protection extends to discrimination and harassment in the field of employment, but also social security when it is made on the basis of gender reassignment. Labor migration can bring all over the world genuine socioeconomic opportunities, and all over the world can reduce discrimination and restrictions on rights and liberties. I said can. These opportunities are often coupled with the vulnerabilities that are experienced by migrant workers worldwide and in this region. Having a research on this topic is important to bring forward evidence, as we said, to raise awareness, as we hope, and ultimately to change the policies so that they can be more inclusive. When we speak of leaving no one behind, no one should be left behind. It is important that all countries reaffirm human rights principles of non-discrimination and inclusion enshrined in the human rights instruments, and this could translate to inclusion of people with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expressions in bilateral labor migration agreements. Enhancing the knowledge and the capacity of all stakeholders on the rights and the needs of LGBTIQ+ people is also important. Now, I would like to finish by a quote, something to keep in mind. I'm not going to quote a High Representative, Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Borrell. I think there was enough of all the messages that he passes in what I just said. Let me go somewhere else. Yesterday in Delhi, there was a public address by the Indian Supreme Court Judge Dhananjaya Chandrachud. And what he did in his speech was to quote one of the Beatles' most iconic music tracks, "All You Need Is Love." And he said that perhaps we need a little bit more than love. He called for structural and attitudinal changes in society to let the LGBTQ community live a life of autonomy and dignity, and calling for changes to take place in our hearts and in our souls. I would say, if it exists. But I wish to conclude by congratulating Safe and Fair team, ILO and UN Women, represented here, and the partners, Edge Effect, Migrant Forum in Asia, and the ASEAN SOGIE Caucus for undertaking this research. And I look forward to a fruitful discussions this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for indeed talking, highlighting the importance of evidence advocacy, and we'll be happy to share some of the forward thinking we've already started with Edge Effect, even within Safe and Fair. So thank you very much for the remarks and the support of the European Union and your support in this process. Now, I want to mention that we do have Thai-English translation. We have a few of these equipment because Kunlek, who I'll introduce later, will be speaking in Thai. But because the event is also live streamed apart from Zoom, we will have a summary when she speaks at the end also for those who are in the live stream. So indeed, nothing about us without us. Along with the partners, the European Union, we have to thank the migrant workers who have shared their journeys, their stories with us, some of which we will now hear from Ms. Emily Dwyer, who's a co-founder of Edge Effect, specialist LGBTIQ or SOGIE's development and humanitarian organization. And Emily herself has been working in the AIDS sector since early 2000s, and she worked as a radio journalist in Australia and Southeast Asia. I would also like to invite at this stage Kun Pathanarin Wongkad Kuntrong and Kun Lek to please join here. After the presentation, we'll also be hearing from them. So please, if you could join, Kun Lek and Kuntrong. Thank you. And if anybody would like the equipment, please tell our team. In any case, we'll have a summary at the end. So we start with the presentation on the findings from the study. And over to you, Emily, please.
Thank you very much, Deepa, Your Excellency, other distinguished guests, other people with diverse SOGIE in the audience, journalists and others. Thank you very much for joining us tonight to hear more about this research, the report, a very beautiful but heavy jacket. I want to acknowledge firstly that I'm sitting here and talking about the research, but I think the real experts are the migrant workers themselves. I think it's really important that when we think about migrant workers with diverse SOGIE, we acknowledge their agency, we acknowledge their ideas, that we don't fall into the trap of treating them as passive victims of a system. The system often works against them, but they are fighting back. And often making great use of the opportunities that they have. We will have a video at the end of the session that probably explains the situation far better than I can in the time that I have here. Also very much want to thank our research teams, ASEAN SOGIE Caucus and Migrant Forum in Asia, ILO, UN Women, of course the EU, who funded this work. So we've gone on to the next slide. Why is it important to have this report at all? And I should say, when I'm talking about migrant workers with diverse sexual orientations, gender identities and expressions, if that's not a term you're familiar with, then it's another way of talking about lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans and queer people. It's a bit more inclusive of identities and people in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world who don't fit into those boxes of LGBTI that we may be more familiar with. It's really important to have this research because migrant work is a fundamental part in this part of the world of how people with diverse SOGIE are making sense of their lives and building resilient lives. On to the next slide. Of course, everyone, when we talk about everyone, it should mean everyone. These words, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. All human beings, not some, not most, but all, were spoken almost 10 years ago by then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and it feels like we need to keep saying those words. All people, not all people except LGBTIQ people. It says all people are born free and equal in dignity and rights. As Your Excellency pointed out, with the Sustainable Development Goals, no one is left behind. Not no one except LGBTIQ people. When we think about international labour standards and conventions, when they speak of all migrant workers, that's all migrant workers, not all migrant workers except for LGBTIQ people. So the answers to these questions are, of course, yes. Our frameworks, our policies, our services should be including LGBTIQ people. Slide. I guess the headline of this research is actually positive. There's a positive story here. I think that's really important because often when we're telling stories of LGBTIQ people and we're sharing this kind of research, it's easy to focus on all of the things that are going wrong because there are plenty of those. There are plenty of problems. But in this case, there's also a really positive story to tell of people with diverse SOGIE taking the opportunity through migrant work to improve their situation. Often they're doing that despite the system, however, rather than because of the system. In fact, migrant work it's almost a perfect microcosm of the situation for LGBTIQ people or people with diverse SOGIE. Precarity is a word that's used in the report in terms of people's relationships with their family, with their community, at school, in workplaces, in public life. People with diverse SOGIE face all kinds of challenges. Migrant workers of all kinds also face many challenges. living in other countries, living sometimes with uncertain legal situations, being isolated, being away from friends and family and country. Migrant workers with diverse SOGIE face both of these conditions simultaneously. Next slide. So let's focus on what's working. Next slide. 72% of migrant workers with diverse SOGIE said that they had economic motivations and they chose their countries of destination based on where they felt they could make the most money. It's really important that they have this opportunity. Unfortunately, what it seems, because of the challenges that they face in their countries of origin, the need to do migrant work to improve their economic situation means that migrant work almost becomes a necessity rather than a choice. Now, everyone should have the choice to do this, but it shouldn't be a necessity. Nevertheless, those who do take up migrant work, 63% of them were able to save and remit funds back to families. And at times this meant that they had different kinds of conversations with their families, that they gained more acceptance, and they hoped that this would continue when they went back to their countries of origin. 41% were also trying to escape discrimination, but as we've heard, discrimination follows migrant workers into their countries of destination. And it's important to distinguish, I think, between two kinds of discrimination here that are found in the report. There's direct discrimination, which was often by other migrant workers, by government officials, be they border officials or officials of other government departments, or employers or customers of organisations. So when we speak of direct discrimination, we're talking about people directly acting against LGBTIQ people, enacting violence, being discriminatory, excluding LGBTIQ people deliberately because they don't think LGBTIQ people should enjoy the same rights or should have the same opportunities as other people. And this violence and discrimination and exclusion that was experienced by migrant workers with diverse SOGIE was deeply profound. The fear of experiencing this kind of discrimination and violence and exclusion leads many migrant workers with diverse SOGIE to try to conceal that aspects of their lives. They don't share that with anyone else, and they sort of carry it around with themselves, concerned that someone is going to discover this fact. It's a burden to be carrying around all the time, concerned that if someone does discover, well, I might face discrimination, I might face violence, I might lose my job, I might have to go home, just because I'm a person with diverse sexual orientation, gender identity or expression. So 46% of the migrant workers that we spoke to actively conceal the fact that they are LGBTQ people. Many also withdraw, so they don't access services that other migrant workers access. They don't go to the police if there are instances of violence or discrimination, because they fear, well, maybe there'll just be more discrimination that will follow from that. Maybe if I'm an undocumented migrant worker as well, maybe there won't be a firewall between going to the police and immigration authorities, and maybe I'll find myself on the other side of the border. So many withdraw from services, many don't report violence, many stay as quiet as possible and talked about just staying calm and trying to deal with problems themselves. Makes it very difficult for migrant workers with diverse SOGIE to have justice. As well as direct discrimination, though, there's also indirect discrimination. And what we mean by this is that it's not enough just to be non-discriminatory. You actually have to take positive steps to include migrant workers with diverse SOGIE in research, in policy and services. What we found when we spoke to migrant worker service providers is that more than half felt, oh well, migrant workers with diverse SOGIE, they can just use the regular services that we provide for everyone. But often that's not the case. Because of histories of violence and exclusion and discrimination, often LGBTQ people will not go to those services because they might fear discrimination. They might feel like we're not going to get treated equally, we're not going to get the service we need. We also found that Only 18% of migrant worker service providers, government and non-government service providers, actually train their staff in working with LGBTIQ people, and only 4% had specific tailored or targeted programs to address the needs of migrant workers with diverse SOGIE. And what this means is that these migrant workers are likely to fall through the cracks, because they're probably not going to go to those service providers in the first place, and even if they do, the services won't be there which are relevant for them and that speak to the challenges that they experience as people with diverse SOGIE. So if we go on to a couple more slides, we've spoken about discrimination, harassment and violence. On to the next slide, and the limited services and support. So if we keep going a little bit further to recommendations, how do we fix it? Well, there are 5 groups of recommendations. One is on policy, and this is recognising that global policy, human rights standards mean all people should be included. And there's sufficient basis already in international human rights standards, in the SDGs, in labour standards, for migrant workers with diverse SOGIE to be included in funding, in policy, in research, in services. It means other things like eliminating laws that discriminate against LGBTIQ people, eliminating over-policing, ensuring that there's a kind of conversation at ASEAN level about including migrant workers with diverse SOGIE in the conversation. It means building connections between unions, private sector organisations and governments to discuss these issues, and bringing diverse SOGIE SCSOs, LGBTIQ organisations, into that picture. It means doing the research, as we've started doing here, training in organisations and providing support for them to engage with migrant workers. It means providing inclusive services, not treating LGBTIQ people as victims, listening to them, asking them what they want, being creative, not assuming that the same solutions will work for LGBTIQ people as others, thinking about peer networks and hotlines and other ways of reaching out to people who may not use services that are set up for other migrant workers, and providing the funding to make sure all of this can happen. And of course doing the advocacy, as we're doing tonight, and as you can all do from your positions, to call for migrant workers with diverse SOGIE to be included. There are lots of champions behind this work. I want to recognise the ILO, who's one of 12 UN agencies back in 2015 that signed onto a declaration to say that they would work to include LGBTIQ people or people with diverse SOGIE, and this research is an example of that, of Deepa Bharati from the program. Gurchitan Sandhu in the ILO office in Geneva, who has recently left the ILO but was a driving force for this work in inclusion of people with diverse SOGIE in the world of work. My colleagues at EduFect, especially Lana Wolf, we hope that the rest of this evening is enlightening, that the report is enlightening, and this is very much the beginning of a conversation, that it provides the evidence required for organisations to fund this work, to develop policy, to provide inclusive services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. I know it was hard to summarize that extremely rich report into a few slides. Colleagues, the report is available online. We will be sharing with you the QR code at the end of this evening. We also have a brief for anyone who wants to quickly look at the key findings and recommendations. Indeed, it was a question, how inclusive are we? And I'm very pleased to share that along with our continued advocacy on the issue, we are also going to be developing training materials for migrant workers, resource centers, and civil society organizations working with migrant workers on SOGIEs and LGBTI with EduFect, and using some capacity building opportunities as a safe and fair program going forward. We're also pleased that many of the gender strategies of programs working with migrant workers, certainly in the ILO and with UN Women, have are incorporating gender with all its diversity and going beyond the binary. So I wouldn't say we have started. We are part of an advocacy movement or a movement which has been going on for long, but we are happy to be part of this journey now. So now it's my pleasure to invite, we'll have two more speakers, Kun Patnarin Wongkad, aka Kun Trong, who was the Thailand researcher. As I mentioned, this is a 4-country research which was done in Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines. Kun Trong worked in Togetherness and Equality Action Forum. She's worked for a very long time on LGBTI rights. After she speaks, Kun Lek, who's a migrant worker here in Thailand from Myanmar, and she's a garment worker who will speak. And when she speaks, she will speak in Thai. If anybody needs support with translation, it will be provided in the form of a summary, but if you have the translation device, you can follow it. So Kun Trong, if you can share a little bit, you did this research during COVID. It started and on a topic which we have heard is not without its challenges. If you'd like to share a bit about that journey and your messages.
Okay, so this is on, right?
It is on,
oh, okay,
yes.
okay. I thought there was a button. Yeah, so we did this research in the beginning of 2021. So that was when the COVID got better, and then it got worse again. And at that time, the migrant workers are mostly affected. So I would say it was quite challenging for us, the researchers in Thailand, because we planned for something, but the plan changed on the other side. So we have to adapt a lot, and because of the, as everyone knows that COVID makes the vulnerable people even more vulnerable. So and this includes the migrant workers too. So we found that working with the migrant workers, whether they are documented or not, there are some concerns are always there. The safety concern, fear for immigration, even though they are here legally, and the concern for their identities, for being LGBTQI. So. And because of COVID, I would say it was quite challenging. And actually, I would like to thank to all the NGOs, the people who we reached out to, who at that time they were very busy, and they were able to help us to connect to the migrants because we couldn't do it without their help. Yeah, and actually, I would like to share that it's personally it is my learning as well, that as a researcher doing this research at that time, I have some learning that this research connect me personally with the people who I interview, because I get to listen to the experience in front of me, and it makes me realize that not only being a researcher, but also I'm also a person with everyone who are also, I wouldn't who all have problems. Everyone has problems in different ways, but as listening to their stories, people, at some point, people have ways to cope up. People have ways to overcome their challenge. So it's my learning. I got inspired by listening to them, and so I keep telling myself that whatever that we're doing, we shouldn't stop. It will turn out good. Yeah.
Thank you so much for highlighting the resilience. We always talk about voice, choice, and agency, and for highlighting that the migrant workers with diverse SOGIEs have the voice, the choice, the agency. We need the enabling environment, and of course, I don't mean to underplay the challenges, but it's certainly not, we take a survivors and agency approach. we'll always come back to you, and colleagues who are on Zoom, participants, please put your questions in chat. I think we are all very familiar. There are questions and comments coming in, so we'll take them all at the end. Also for the audience here, we'll take at the end. We wouldn't be closing it without the questions, but may I take this opportunity now to invite Kunlek. Kunlek, if you could please share some strategies as an LGBTIQ migrant worker. What have been your strategies to make the most of your migration journey? And if there were one or two messages you would like to give on what should change, what would those be? So over to you, Kunlek.
สวัสดีครับเท่าที่เป็น LGBTD ส่งมากในประชาชนแล้วก็ขั้นบ้านเราอย่างน้อยก็มันไม่ค่อยยอมรับแต่ว่าเราก็ทำให้ยอมรับให้ได้คือเราเป็นคนด้วยกันแม้ว่าประเภทไหนแม้ว่าประเภทผู้หญิงกระเทยเป็น LGBTD ก็แล้วแต่ครับคือเราอยากให้เห็นว่าเราเป็นคนด้วยกัน
Please bear with us. That was just to say that technology always has its way of surprising us. Okay. If you could translate as well as then summarize at the end, would that be possible? Would it be possible?
No. If you want me to translate simultaneously, I will not memorize what she's saying.
That's true as well. Okay.
Otherwise, I have to do it consecutively, and I have to take notes while she's saying, and not translating.
Okay. If you can just do simultaneously, and maybe somebody can take notes and we can read for the people who are being. So if you can do translation.
Okay, so I will do that simultaneously.
Yes, please. Thank you.
คือไม่ว่าประเภทไหนประเภทผู้หญิงประเภทกระเทยและผู้ชายและผู้หญิงไม่ว่ายังไงก็แล้วแต่ครับเราก็เป็นคนด้วยกันแต่ว่าบ้านเราแม้ว่าพ่อแม่เราก็ยอมรับยังไม่ได้เลยครับแต่ว่าเราก็สู้เราก็ทำให้ยอมรับได้ครับแม้ว่าเราอยู่กับใครแม้ว่าเราไปเจอกับใครครอบครัวบางคนยอมรับเราไม่ได้ดูถูกจริงๆแล้วเลยอยากฝากว่าไม่อยากให้ดูถูกหรอกครับเราเป็นคนด้วยกันเขาก็เป็นคนดีนั่นแหละไม่ใช่ว่าเป็นคนร้ายครับขั้นประเภทมันไม่เหมือนกันกับชาวบ้านนั่นแหละครับก็เลยอยากให้รักกันแม้ว่าประเภทไหนเราก็อยากฝากว่าขอดูแลพวกเราด้วยครับเราไปไหนมาไหนก็ใครๆก็ดูถูกเราก็บางทีก็นวลใจไหมก็นวลใจแต่เราสู้เพราะว่าเราก็เป็นคนเขาก็เป็นคนพ่อแม่บางโขนี่ดูถูกมากกว่ากันนี้อีกแต่ต่อไปสมัยนี้ LGBTD ก็ไม่เยอะขึ้นแล้วครับกระเทยก็ไม่เยอะยังไงก็เราต้องยอมรับให้ได้ครับเราก็อยากให้ดูแลผู้ LGBTD ด้วยค่ะต้องยอมรับให้ได้ด้วยครับแล้วแค่นี้แหละครับ
Thank you very much, Kunlek. I think I can just summarize for those who are connecting online. Kunlek spoke about whatever gender we are human, reiterating the fundamental principles of dignity, non-discrimination, both direct and indirect. He spoke about people looking down, starting from family to society and community. being insulting and asking for an end to such behaviors of different forms of harassment, violence, discrimination, and acceptance. So, I thank you for that message. I think that's one of the fundamental principles, and thank you for being with us. I'm sure there might be some questions which will be translated to you. So maybe we will go next to, as we mentioned, this is a regional research. So we have some more voices. Emily, did you want, maybe you can say at the end of the video what it is. So maybe can we go, Julian, to the...
ធ្វើឲ្យគាត់បង្ខំឲ្យខ្ញុំផ្លាស់ប្ដូរខ្លួនឯងទៅជាមនុស្សស្រីដោយការរៀបចំខ្លួនជាស្រីទុកសក់វែងស្លៀកពាក់ស្រីនៅក្នុងការដាក់សម្ពាធរបស់ឪពុកនិងការរើសអើងតែមានការវ័យយ៉ាងធ្ងន់ធ្ងរម្ដងក្រោយពេលដែលគាត់ចាប់បានថាខ្ញុំមានទំនាក់ទំនងស្នេហាជាមួយមនុស្សស្រីខ្ញុំក៏បានសម្រេចចិត្ត
คนกลุ่มนี้เขาไม่ค่อยเปิดกว้างในชาติพันธุ์เท่าไหร่ก็ยังแคบอยู่นะคะ
Thank you. As you can see, the research report itself draws its title from one of these voices. I know we are running a little behind time, but did you want to say a few words on the video, Emily, or?
Sure. There's a bisexual man from Vietnam who mentioned that the idea that being an LGBTIQ person or a migrant worker with diverse SOGIE, involved that jacket, that carrying around an extra burden, that along with all of the other things that migrant workers have to cope with, that being a person with diverse SOGIE just adds more layers, more things to worrying about whether someone's going to find out, whether you're still going to have a job tomorrow, whether something even worse might happen to you. I think the report really does centre a lot of those stories across the migrant worker journey. So there are stories of people before in the countries of origin, before they decide to become migrant workers and why. Stories of people crossing borders in transit, people's stories in countries of destination, and then what happens when they go back home. Do the freedoms that they experience in their countries of destination, do they all of a sudden stop? Does the family acceptance that they had when they were sending money back home all of a sudden stop when they're not doing that anymore? Of course, there's in the report there's a lot of discussion of context for LGBTIQ people or people with diverse SOGIE in each of the countries and policy recommendations. But I think the stories in many respects speak for themselves and highlight the fact that while people with diverse SOGIE face many challenges, they're also coming up with many of the solutions. I mean, the word brave is thrown around a lot. It's sometimes thrown around in a way which is a little bit condescending or patronising, but these people who spoke to us, but also people who are just making their way through a world which is often hostile toward them, are genuinely brave.
Thank you. So with everybody's permission, we'll extend the evening a little bit more, because now is the session for asking questions. If you'd like to ask questions, let me just open up first for people who are here. If you have any questions, please do introduce yourself. If you can please go to the mic over there. And everybody please speak in the mic, because we want to make sure people are connected on Zoom or for the live streaming purposes. If not, I'll open it up for the Zoom. Please, if you could introduce yourself as well, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Borislav Gerasimov, and I'm with the Global Alliance Against Trafficking Women. We're an NGO here in Bangkok. I was wondering, you spoke a lot about the economic aspects of migration and and sort of negative aspects also, or challenges that LGBT people faced. Did you also get the sense whether some managed to, let's say, realize their gay or lesbian or trans desires or lives in the country of destination? As we know, LGBT people migrate to other countries very often to express themselves or to find a community, but I didn't hear much about this in the presentation. There was maybe a little bit in the video. Thank you.
Shall we take a couple of questions? Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
My name is Tong Runachinaprom from tourism industry. I have a question for Kulek. From being one of the LGBTQ here, so what is the hardest insult situation that you have, and how do you deal with it? And what did you do about that situation? Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we take questions from the Zoom? There aren't any. Are there any comments? Okay. Maybe then we answer these first. Emily, over to you. And then any of the panel members.
Sure, yes. I mean, certainly some LGBT, I think 40% of the migrant workers said that they were trying to escape discrimination or to have more freedom in the country of destination than they do in their country of origin. It was sometimes hard to distinguish that between people wanting economic advancement and people wanting to escape from discrimination, because often those things go hand in hand. The kinds of discrimination that people experience within their families, at schools, in workplaces, in daily life, are forms of discrimination that hold people back from economic advancement, but of course also hold them back from being whole people. And so different LGBTIQ people expressed a desire to go to countries to self-actualize, to discover who they are, to have an experience of actually living that life. Some people, for example, came to Thailand for medical reasons, because they thought that the medical support that they would receive in Thailand was maybe more sensitive to their needs as a transgender person rather than in their countries of origin, or that they could just earn enough money here or in other places that they could undertake the surgeries that they would like to take as part of their transition. There were other people who were just sort of getting away from the constraints of family and the expectations, and just living a life where they didn't have all of that pressure on them all the time to go into a heterosexual marriage because that's what their parents want, to have kids because that's what their parents want. And by being a migrant worker, they were at least able to delay that. Some didn't want to go back to their countries of origin because as soon as they went back, they felt that freedom that they'd experienced, that ability to be themselves would evaporate, and so had plans to migrate again, or to either back to the same country or to go to another country of origin. I guess those experiences of self-actualization, of just finding that joy, of actually being who you are, were at times tempered by the discrimination that people experienced. But there certainly were people. I mean, one story of a trans woman from Myanmar who went to Chiang Mai, and they said, look, initially there was some discrimination, and initially I didn't tell anyone, and initially I was in the closet, but then I realised that I could be myself, and I think there were stories like that of joy and happiness that people don't always have in their lives.
Kuntrong, would you like to share some stories like that, which...
Sorry, can you repeat?
Did you hear any examples from the people that you interviewed who were here as well as for economic reasons, because they wanted to be themselves and they wanted to explore what that meant?
Yeah, so there are some people from Myanmar who migrate to Thailand to Bangkok, near Bangkok area and in Chiang Mai. Some shared with us that some of them they know their identities since they were young, and then they heard stories about Thailand on the media, and they want to feel the freedom. They want to be themselves. Also, they want to find jobs, because the migrants we interview, they are from ethnic minorities. They live in some of the, actually many of them that we interview, they live in not in the capital. So they were seeking opportunities, and then they heard from people who came to Thailand earlier. So it's like word by word, and then they have some picture about like having freedom, being themselves into Thailand. So they decide to come here. And actually, some of them they follow their parents, or their parents send them to school as well. That we see. So yeah, it is also their decision, and some of them they follow their parents for this purpose.
Thank you. And when you read the report, you'll find it's such diversity of experiences of why people migrate and how their experiences are, and that's literally no one box fits all. If you want to know what it means, that research shows. The other thing which the research reiterated was the diverse sectors into which migrant workers with diverse SOGIEs go to. One would think we also realized there were certain assumptions which were made, and it's as migrant workers go to different sectors, it's migrant workers with diverse SOGIEs going also to diverse sectors. Language, I think that a couple of years back under the Safe and Fair program, we did a glossary of terms, rights-based terms on labor, migration and violence. And in the course of this study and this evening, we did one, thanks to Kuntrong, on specific LGBT SOGIE terms into Thai. And maybe we need to do more in this journey to learn better. So the importance of language and rights-based language, non-discriminatory language was very clear. And finally, when we started this research, one of the things was, are we talking about same-sex marriage? We are a labor organization, we were talking, and we are a project working on migrant workers. But we want to look at the world of work which impacts decent work, social justice for all workers. And in the course of that, many of the stories you heard started with a migration journey back home in the country of origin, and it follows, the experiences follow even upon return. Well, I think we can all speak about this research for all evening, but we do not have all evening. So are there any further questions? Is there anything on Zoom? Does anybody have questions here? We also have, at the end of the day, some snacks where you can informally discuss if you want. But if there are no questions, can I ask the panel, please, if you want to say Kunlek, Kuntrong, or Emily? Yes, please.
Kunlek has one question that he has not answered yet.
If he's comfortable. I don't think we want to. Would like to answer? Okay, please. And anything else as well.
ไม่ใช่รู้สึกยังไงใช่ไหมตอนที่เจ็บปวดแต่ตอนนั้นคือผมไปเจอกับข้อความผู้หญิงน่ะเขาก็ด่านะก็คือเหมือนด่าภาษาพม่านั่นแหละแต่เขาว่าอีทอนรับผิดชอบไม่ได้นี่เหมือนกับดูถูกมากเลยอ่ะคือยังไงเรารักเขาเราก็รับผิดชอบได้แม้ว่าเราเป็น LGBT ก็จริงเราไม่ใช่ตัวเป็นผู้ชายก็จริงแต่เราหาเลี้ยงได้เรารับผิดชอบได้ตอนนั้นเราเจ็บปวดมากเจ็บปวดคือมันยอมรับไม่ได้ไงเราก็เจ็บเป็นคนเหมือนกันเราทำได้ทำไมเขายอมรับไม่ได้แต่เขาว่ายังไงก็ช่างเราก็สู้ทำให้เขาดูเราว่าเราเป็นคนดีเราสู้ได้ทำให้เขายอมรับได้ครับก็หลายปีอยู่นั่นแหละครับ
Thank you very much for sharing. Again, very quickly, he was speaking about the insult from the girl's family of his partner or his girlfriend, who associated his ability to take care of the girlfriend in the context of his sexuality. Okay, I think we will call, pardon me, there is a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Sorry, there's one question from the Zoom, which is what are the recommendations that have been made to the government as per in the report?
What are the recommendations to the government? Very briefly, Emily, if you'd like to.
Well, I guess to all governments. I mean, governments are tripartite partners, along with unions and private sector business organisations. So I think many of the recommendations in the report are relevant for government. I think one thing that was interesting and that came out from the interviews or the responses that we received from the government in Thailand is that while there isn't necessarily a lot of awareness at the moment of the lives of people with diverse SOGIE and what their needs are as migrant workers, that the government officers here were very interested to learn in the research and to learn more. They wanted to receive training, and they wanted to be follow-up from the report. We also found that from government representatives in other countries where we did the research. So, for example, some migrant worker resource centres in Cambodia are run by government departments. It's also the case in Vietnam. And again, in those countries, they said, well, we haven't received any information, we haven't received training. We kind of think there might be LGBTIQ people here, but we don't really know what to do. But there wasn't hostility there. There was curiosity and interest and a desire to do a better job. I think at an intergovernmental level, at an ASEAN level, there is a need to do a lot more to integrate the rights of people with diverse SOGIE. In parts of the report, I mean, there are, and because the ASEAN SOGIE Caucus was one of the partners on the research, I mean, their own research and policy documents make it clear that within an ASEAN context, often there is limited discussion of LGBTIQ rights and people with diverse SOGIE. So at an intergovernmental level, ASEAN, there need to be opportunities to have these kinds of conversations, and for them to actually involve diverse SOGIE civil society organisations and migrant workers themselves. There are also government officials who come into direct contact with migrant workers in different ways. So, for example, at border crossings, and in the film, you saw one example of a very disturbing situation where there was a government border official who sought to sexually abuse a trans person. But there are also other stories in the report of people going to government offices. A lesbian who presents in a masculine way, being told that they have to go and have a haircut, or that they have to look more like a woman in order to get a photograph on a document. So there are all kinds of ways that government officials engage with migrant workers with diverse SOGIE, and all kinds of opportunities, maybe for migrant workers with diverse SOGIE to be treated with dignity and respect, and to understand, I guess, the whole life experience that leads that migrant worker to that point. I think sometimes government officials and other service providers, they might only see a migrant worker with diverse SOGIE just in the context of through a window at a border crossing, a fleeting moment. But it's really important to understand the whole life course of LGBT people or people with diverse SOGIE, that there are all of these experiences that they've had leading up to this point, that lead them to have certain fears, to have certain expectations, to have certain needs. And if we're going to do justice to all of the claims we make of leaving no one behind and including all people, then we need to put the effort in to understanding their lives, to respecting them as people. LGBTIQ people with diverse SOGIE, are not asking for special treatment. I think that's often a misnomer. We're asking for the opportunities that all other people have or should have to build resilient lives, to understand themselves, to be people in this world. And that surely is not too much to ask.
Thank you. I think on that very, very strong note, can we have a round of applause, please? Okay. May I have that as the final question? Please introduce yourself. Please go ahead.
Thank you. This question is for Emily. I'm Jimmy. I'm from Beijing Gender, LGBT CSO from China. So my question is about migrant worker with HIV. So is there any story from this important report? Or one more question is that, is there any problem or challenging for migrant workers with HIV to receive HIV protection or interventions? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that certainly did come out in the stories. There were migrant workers who are people living with HIV. Some who really wanted more information about their country of destination. So one of the challenges that migrant workers often face is that it's really hard for them to get information about what kinds of services will be available for them in a country of destination, be they health services or access to other services for migrant workers. So people who have ongoing treatment programs were very much interested in whether they would have continued access to those or to PrEP. There were people who came to Thailand, again partly because they felt that as a migrant worker with diverse SOGIE and possibly someone living with HIV, that the medical care that they might get and the kind of service provision in Thailand might be more attuned and respectful of their needs. What we did find in talking to some LGBTIQ CSOs is that sometimes there's a gap between the work of domestic-facing LGBTIQ CSOs and migrant workers, but organisations that focus on providing HIV services often had sort of worked out how to do community engagement really effectively, and so they were connected into some migrant workers who do sex work, or migrant workers that use HIV programs for a variety of reasons. And they also had developed relationships with governments and were able to help people navigate through that. So there were some good positive examples there about if you actually put the effort into doing community engagement, to build relevant services to understand people's lives, then you can make a difference. But certainly there was a lot of concern from people with HIV about access to services. And as you saw in the film, of course, a lot of concern about people who are living with HIV who might be going to countries where consensual same-sex activities between adults are criminalised, because a positive HIV test might be used as a basis for making assumptions or for coming to conclusions about people's sexuality, and the lack of confidentiality around some of those testing processes is deeply disturbing. Definitely an issue.
Thank you. Kuntrong, Kunlek, did you want to say anything? Yeah, Kunlek?
ขอฝากว่าแม้ว่าประเภทไหนนะขอให้รักกันแล้วก็ยังไงบางคนเขาคิดว่าสิ่งที่เป็นไปไม่ได้อาจจะเป็นไปได้ก็ได้ของเราอย่ามองปัดเดียวอะมองไกลๆแม้ว่าประเภทไหนเขาก็สามารถสู้ได้ปัญหาอะไรก็เขาก็แก้ไขได้อยู่ครับแต่ว่าไม่ใช่ 100% อย่างน้อยก็ 50% น่ะคือตัวเราแก้ไขได้อยู่แล้วครับขอฝากว่าไม่ว่าประเภทไหนก็เป็นคนมนุษย์เหมือนกันครับขอให้เข้าใจขอให้มองกับเขาสิ่งดีๆครับค่ะขอบคุณครับ
Thank you very much for reiterating again that looking beyond just the sexual orientation, gender identity part, or not just focusing on that, but being cognizant. At the end, everybody's human. So thank you for that. We'll do a formal launch of the report. We will be printing it, and I have the pleasure and honor of inviting Mr. Hashez. We are also here honored by the presence of the ILO Deputy Regional Director, Kun Panuda Bunpala, as well as the UN Women Acting Regional Director and Deputy Regional Director, Ms. Sarah Nibs. If you could come, along with Emily Kuntrong, Kunlek. As I said, the report is available on the QR code. It's available on the website. Jackie, you will have to guide, I think in the front, perhaps, if you could join. Okay. Do you want them to sit or stand? I think standing here, right? Yes, please. Because that's too restricted. And yeah, mask, no mask. If you could please hold it up. We won't do a Jackie, mask or no mask or both.
Both, please.
Oops. Okay, maybe.
We start without mask.
Yeah, we can. We all work together. Emily, where? Without? Sarah, then, if you don't mind. Very, very much. Oh, with the mask. Oh, one with the mask. Thank you so very much again for all those who are connected, who have joined. Big thanks to FCCT, Julian, who've been here. Thanks to our amazing translator, always helping us bridge the gap. And most importantly, thanks to the amazing Safe and Fair team, who have been behind the report as well as working to make this evening happen. Thanks, everyone. And please enjoy some snacks, and this will give us an opportunity to discuss a bit more, chat a bit more. Thank you for coming here and for your interest. We will be printing the report. If you'd like a hard copy, please let us know. We'll be happy to share and send you one. And as I mentioned, we'll have some next steps. So if you have ideas of what more we can do, please reach out to us. Thank you very much once again. Thanks, Emily, Kuntrong, and Lek.